Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Broncos Zone podcast, part of the Elevated Pulse Sports family of podcasts. By the fans, for the fans, diehards only. My name is Vince. I'm here tonight with Braden and Coach Cobb. Fellas, how you doing tonight?
Doing
Doing
great.
great.
Yeah. Well, welcome everybody to sort of the mid-summer blues. We're still waiting on things to kick off for the Broncos. We were just talking off air about tomorrow here in Denver. You could start trying to get the training camp tickets at, Braden, did you say 10 a.m.?
10 a.m. Mountain Time. Yeah.
Yeah, so if that's something that you're looking forward to doing, ready to brave the sun, make sure that you're getting online tomorrow at 10 a.m. to do that. And yeah, it should be good. Are either of you guys planning on trying to make it out there?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely planning to. As many as I can possibly get, although it sounds like they're limiting it to 2. I'll take my 2 if I can get them. But, it's just, from my standpoint, it's really good just to see how the guys are doing things, what they're doing. I don't even know if really until later in practices we'll see much. I think that, the first couple of days, while they're exciting, it's good to get out there, smell the fresh cut grass and everything else. I don't know how much we'll see, for I think it's 14 practices, if I'm not mistaken. See how much is really going to come to light on some of those guys. Maybe by the, end of that first week, start seeing a few more guys that'll start pulling ahead and making their shot at making the starting 53. So it'll be interesting to see.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's hop right into it. We've been enjoying some World Cup action, some of us here at EPS, but we're not here to talk about football. We're here to talk about football and the Denver Broncos. So let's get into it. We've got some news to get into as usual, but of course, we always like to start things off with the trivia. So I'm going to hand it over to Coach Cobb. What you got for us this week?
Yeah, so this one we're going to go a little bit in the Wayback Machine. We're going to go with a person who was an assistant special defensive or special teams coordinator and defensive assistant. He was on the 1977 Orange Crush and was with the Broncos for Super Bowl 12 before he became a head coach in his own right, leading 3 different teams and having a great deal of success, but also owning a 1-3. It was 500 record against the Broncos and a 1-3 record in the playoffs against the Broncos. He also, and I'll throw in, actually, before he came to the Broncos, I'll actually also throw in that he was an assistant coach with the Air Force Academy as well.
Okay. So the teams that I might immediately jumped into 20 questions mode, so you can I'll ask questions. You can tell me true or false,
Sure.
or I guess yes or no. But so if you say he went 1-3 against the Broncos in the playoffs?
Yes.
Okay. So were all of the teams that he coached AFC, or were they both AFC and NFC teams?
As a head coach, they were all AFC,
Okay.
but he I believe he ended up with a better record as an assistant coach against the Broncos than he did as a head coach against the Broncos.
Were any of those teams in the Broncos division? I guess at that time we would have maybe included Seattle. Okay.
They were not.
I don't know. I'm struggling.
And you said this was 70s?
Yep, this is in the 70s when they went to Super Bowl 12 against the Dallas Cowboys, part of the Orange Crush defense. He was a assistant special teams coach and an assistant defensive coach. I see to Eric, no, he was not a head coach for the Broncos at any time. I know where he's going with that one. So
Yeah, I think he was thinking Dan Reeves,
yep,
but no, because maybe if it was something like, oh, postseason, did they ever play each other? Then you'd have the Falcons in there, but
sure,
that's too late into the.
yep.
On those same lines, I was thinking maybe Wade Phillips, but you said he didn't coach an NFC team, and he was the Cowboys head coach at one point.
Right.
Okay. Man.
But yeah, he had a 500 record against us all time. 1-3 in the playoffs versus the Broncos. And I'll throw out one last one if you guys, unless you want to take one more shot, because this one should pretty well do it for you. He is also the owner of 6 Super Bowl titles.
Wait. No.
Really?
Is this
Yep.
Bill Belichick?
Robert?
Bill Belichick. Yep, Bill Belichick. He was an assistant special teams coach and a assistant defensive, or he's a defensive assistant with the Broncos back in that 78 team, and he came to us from the Air Force Academy.
I legitimately had no idea that he was ever on the Broncos staff, or the fact that he was an assistant at the Air Force Academy.
Yep, he was an assistant with good old Joe Collier back in the 70s. Didn't last with us long, ended up moving on, and then worked his way up with the Browns, the Jets, and the Patriots as a head coach, which he was not very good with any of those 3 teams. So the fact that the Patriots finally gave him a chance down the road after no success with the Jets, the Browns, and then he even had limited success when he first started with the Patriots. It looked like it was a little touch and go there for a bit. And yeah, but that was one. Yeah, I had to dig into that one, let me tell you, and go through, because for a long time, again, if you talked about the Broncos in the 70s and the defense, it was Joe Collier. A couple of other good coaches that were in there. Nobody that really became assistant or head coaches down the road either. Funny as it is to sit there and look at the coaches amongst Red Miller's guys, Dan Reeves guys, Joe Collier with the defense, Wade Phillips. I don't really think that there were anybody that really jumped out from any of those teams like some of the guys with Shanahan, to be honest with you, and some of his coaching tree that he's had. But yeah, it's pretty amazing to sit there and see those guys. And you would have thought with the success that the Broncos had back in the day, they would have had a lot of assistant coaches jump up and become head coaches, and nobody really out of those groups did. I think. Well, Joe Collier, I think, for a period of time was also an interim head coach for the Buffalo Bills prior to coming to the Broncos. But yep, long time ago with the old Orange Crush defense, and away it went back in 1976 and 77, 78 for that matter. So,
Jim, I gotta hand it to you. That is, I've enjoyed the trivia every single week, but that actually might be my favorite one so far, because I had no idea. And for it to be, some might say the greatest coach of all time, even though I would not agree with that.
no.
And just for lots of people, including me, to not be aware that he was ever associated with the Broncos, let alone an in-state institution, that was a good one to pull out.
Of all things, as an assistant special teams, it's like you wouldn't think that, but that's where a lot of guys get their start.
Yeah.
There's a number of guys that start out as special team coaches, and then they're the guys that all of a sudden it's like, how the heck that guy get to be a head coach? He was assistant special teams a couple of years ago. And yeah, it's interesting to see some of those guys.
My favorite part of that is the 1-3 against the Broncos in the playoffs, and the one win that they got was against that the insane Tebow year.
Yep, right after we did that against the Steelers, and then yeah, it was not
like
a good
56 to 10 or something like that, wasn't it? In Foxborough.
Yeah, it was not pretty. Not pretty.
No, it got out of hand pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, as fun as that season was, I don't know that we were really divisional round worthy, but man, was that an all-time moment, beating the Steelers the way we did in that game. But well done, Coach Cobb. That was
Thank you.
a fun one.
Yeah,
All right,
that was a good one.
let's go ahead and shift over to Broncos news. So we've got Marvin Mims in the media recently, and Marvin Mims, former second round pick of this current Broncos administration, so to speak. He was quoted as saying something along the lines of the Broncos have an incredibly deep wide receiver room, something that we were not saying just a year ago. And it's a bit of a pick your poison situation between Jalen Waddle and, of course, Cortland Sutton has been sort of Mr. Reliable for a number of years now. We saw Troy Franklin be far more consistent this past year than he was in his rookie year, and we saw flashes out of Pat Bryant. So the question is, with Marvin Mims being a guy who's just been sort of a gadget player over the last year, the year before that, he was a little bit more of a downfield threat. But what do the Broncos do with someone like Marvin Mims? He's in a contract year. He had a lot invested in him in terms of draft capital, taking him in the second round pick. Well, who knows what the Broncos are thinking? They do seem to be willing to trade players especially for draft picks. But the national media has already spun this, and they've been linking Marvin Mims to the Buffalo Bills and other teams who historically have had wide receiver issues. And so, what do you all think? What do you make of this news? Would you like to see Marvin Mims stick around on the team and sort of us lean into that pick your poison situation, or do you think it's worth answering calls? And if you feel so inclined, at what level at what point do you trade him? What kind of draft compensation would you be willing to let him go for?
Well, I think they should go into the season with him. I don't think they should trade him. Teams have cluster injuries. Look at the Chargers and their O-line. I don't want to say anything or, that people be like, dude, don't say that as far as injuries go. But, maybe something happens where a few receivers go down. I'd much rather have Mims on the team. It's kind of one of those, I'd rather have him and not need him than need him not have him. And he's also been a playmaker on this team. You go back to the Bengals game or where he caught the pass that was supposed to be to Sutton, but he caught it, and it was a huge. I can't remember if that was the Packers or some other big matchup, but I definitely want him on the team at least going into the season. If he's not getting the ball mid-season and Pat Bryant and Troy Franklin are getting more opportunities, then maybe we can start to think about trade deadline. But at least going into the season, I would much rather have him on the team and preparing for a Super Bowl.
What about you, Coach Cobb?
Yeah, I agree with Braden. We talked about this offseason, what the Broncos have done. Obviously, Waddle being the big piece that's there. But if you're talking about loading Bo Nix with weapons, getting rid of a weapon doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. I think that the only thing we start looking at and thinking about the trade deadline is if there's somebody that starts picking up and stealing the kick return and the punt return from him a little bit, then I think you start looking at, well, how much value is he? Of course, we've got another running back. You like to use Mims out of the backfield. I love it when they come up with gadget plays out of the backfield with him. And so thinking about that as another possible weapon. But if the offense changes enough and we're starting to get more production out of our backs, and maybe RJ is the receiving back that comes out of the backfield, and and the rest of our guys are running the ball well and everything, then I do think that at some point in time, Mims does become a little bit of a, not necessarily a liability, but certainly a chess piece that we could move to somebody else and pick up a little more draft capital for next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think waiting to for the trade deadline would potentially lessen his value. I bet the Bills would give up maybe like a third right now, which might seem a little high, but they are kind of receiver needy. I mean, Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir, those are good guys, but they're really not that great. I see a lot of similarities with Khalil Shakir and Marvin Mims, just being that very twitchy type player who in that slot position. But you do risk if he's not getting the ball during the season, you do risk him and his value going down to maybe a fourth or fifth pick. But
Sure.
I mean, we're already so talented, we're already drafting for depth for the most part.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think especially after last season, and I mean, we really only added one wide receiver to the room. Granted, a pretty good one, but I like the way you put it, Braden. I think you said I'd rather have him and not need him than need him and need him and not have him. I think that's exactly it. Unless a team just comes with like an offer you can't refuse, and to me that would be in that second, third round range. Um, I don't think you do it. Like, I mean, I always struggle to know what the sort of fair value draft compensation is for a veteran player, because sometimes, I mean, I always go back to the AJ Brown trade from the Titans, or yeah, from the Titans to the Eagles. The Eagles didn't give up very much, but then you see some of these other ones where, you know, teams are clearly overpaying, and it feels like the NFL is like the hardest to read in my mind in terms of like what fair market value is for any one player. And someone like Marvin Mims, yes, he's an all pro in the return game, but how much has he given the wide receiver game? That's open to interpretation and what the play caller feels like they can use him. And on that note, like, what if we're missing out on something amazing with Marvin Mims and Davis Webb? Because I mean, we saw how Sean Payton used him, and 2 years ago it seemed like he could really be something. This last year, he was a little more than a gadget, and so yeah, to me it would have to be an offer you can't refuse. Like if we end up trading him for anything in the 5 to 7 round range, I'd be like, wouldn't you have rather have had him than a guy who's maybe going to be struggling to make your roster? But time will tell. I like Marvin. I think he's shown a lot of explosiveness. I just don't know that we've used him in the right way, but we shall see. Other roster news: the Broncos have officially signed Tyler Onyedem, their third-round pick in the 2026 draft, which means the Broncos rookies are now all officially under contract. That's always good to get that done rather than it being a distraction going into camp. But the question for you all is, can Onyedem help replace some of what Denver lost up front? We all know that we lost JFM and the huge role that he played, but how much of a role is he going to have in this defense? How much will he replace what JFM did, if at all? What do you all think in these early days?
I kind of see this being more of a defensive tackle by committee, somewhat similar to the running back group. I can definitely see him having that role, but we didn't draft him as a day one starter. We didn't, it was he was kind of drafted as a not a project in the terms of like he's got a huge way to go, but he needs it's pretty apparent from his tape that he does need some development in his game in order to take on that full-time JFM role that he had last year. But I'm excited to see him during training camp, and hopefully he can. I think we all hope that he can take on that full-time role, but I see it more as a DT by committee.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all going to be, let's keep our guys fresh. Let's keep them going. I don't think there's going to be anyone other than, with With our ends out there, I think those are the only guys that really pretty well stay out there all the time. I see that, like you said, Brayden, the whole D tackle situation. Knowing that teams are going to run on us as much as they are with some of the guys that were, or some of the teams that were playing this season. I think it's a matter of keeping everybody fresh so that we're ready to go come December and January, and hopefully into February. And just I think that's the same thing. It's just a matter of rotating those guys and keeping them fresh and bringing him up along. He's got some good guys to learn from ahead of him. There's no doubt about that. And even if he can show some flashes as the season goes on, that just bodes well for him going into next season. But just more of a situational player maybe this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, with as good as this defense is, yes, JFM was a huge loss all across the defensive line. They moved him around a fair amount. But if we drafted a third round pick to just come in and be the day one starter, then I don't think we had the depth that we thought we did last year. And that's not to say that he can't be. If he comes in and just blows people away and like clearly wins the job, then like, yeah, he should be the starter. But I mean, you look at DJ Jones, I won't get too far into this. If people are interested in a more detailed breakdown of the defensive line, we had that done sometime in the last few weeks. But I mean, DJ Jones graded out on, according to Pro Football Focus, as one of the top 15, I believe, interior defensive linemen in the entire NFL. And, you know, that's somebody we have returning. We have Uzurike, which was a fourth round pick back in 2022.
Yep.
So, I mean, we've got depth there. And if Onyedim comes in and wins the role, I think he will have really have deserved it. And so, you know, I would not be shocked if we didn't see a ton of him. Maybe he comes on more over the course of the season. You know, there's nothing wrong with developing someone or drafting someone and letting them develop, especially when you've got the talent in front of him, which I think the Broncos defense certainly does. So, yeah, you know, JFM was great, but I don't think there's a like for like replacement right away. But I do think we have some really good players, and I don't, you know, happy that JFM got his money, but I don't think it's going to be a loss, but I don't think it's going to be as gaping of a hole as it may have felt when we initially felt the sting of JFM going over to the Titans.
Right.
Now, for our last bit of news, lots of outlets have been talking about the Broncos' schedule over the past couple of weeks, and people are debating whether or not the Broncos have the ability to repeat as AFC West champions. They're bringing up the fact that Kansas City may be in a resurgent year. Time will tell with Patrick Mahomes' injury. But, you know, with people being uncertain, with Davis Webb being the new play caller, losing some key contributors. We were just talking about John Franklin Myers, us being uncertain of where Bo is at with his injury and such a tough schedule. Do you all think it's realistic that, or how realistic would you all say it is for the Broncos to repeat as AFC West champions this year?
Oh, I think it's completely possible. I have their schedule pulled up here. I mean, a lot of last year was that we weren't really that explosive downfield. We had moments, we had great moments, but we didn't have a guy who could take the top off of a defense. Especially, I was live at that Jaguars game, and we only had a few plays that went long. Not that many. Now we have Jalen Waddle who can make those plays. So I think adding that dimension to the offense where Bo's great at, you know, short and intermediate routes, getting the ball to those. But now we really have a guy who can not just do back shoulder fades like Sutton, who's so great at those routes. But we have someone who's actually a speed demon and can outrun a cornerback. As far as defense goes, I'm not worried about the defense, even the interior. If we can just have our D tackles not really having to worry about the pass because we have our edge rushers and Zach Allen and all that stuff, and just clog up the lanes. And that's where I think Oneedham could really be a huge impact. Is he's a big body dude that can just clog up lanes. Same with DJ Jones. But it's definitely a harder schedule. I think the first 5 or 6 weeks, especially if Patrick Mahomes is healthy, is a gauntlet. But that being said, I'd much rather have that early in September instead of, in that December where it's like, we need these wins to get into the playoffs. Let's go in. One, it's the beginning of the year. People are trying things. It leaves the September, October window open to head coaches trying different things and maybe things not working out. We'll definitely be doing that with Davis Webb, but it leaves, teams like the 49ers or the Rams or the Jaguars to, have issues in their offenses and defenses as well. So I think it's a big opportunity to not only take advantage of when teams are trying things out and maybe they're not going well, we take advantage of those situations, but also if we win like 3 to 4 of those 5 games, who's stopping us? Like at that point, it's we've proved we can go toe to toe with anybody in the league. And last year wasn't a fluke. The year before getting to the playoffs wasn't a fluke. And that we deserve to be in the Super Bowl last year and deserve to be in the Super Bowl this year.
Sure. Yeah, I was just looking at that schedule too, Brett, and one of the things that hit me on that is in our first 6 weeks is that is 3 of those games are national TV also. Mm-hmm. And again, like you said, I mean, if we ended up with 3-3, if we ended up 4-3 out of those, or 3-3, or somewhere along those lines, close in that area out of those first 6 games, I think that sends a message to the NFL. I also sit there and look at it to think about our strength. If I'm looking at defense, obviously, again, now we're going to have. We talked about linebackers. I know we'll talk about linebackers a little bit more tonight. Is that our strength? Is that our weakness? I think, in all honesty, right now with the guys we have on defense, I look at the Chiefs, I look at the Jaguars and their firepower. Obviously, the Rams are going to come in. A lot of receivers, a lot of things going on. 49ers, not entirely sure. Brandon Ayuk wants out of there now, so we're not sure what that's going to end up bringing. The Chargers, supposedly they've loaded up with a few guys at wide receiver. And then the Seahawks, I think they're going to be a run-heavy team. But those teams like to pass. And what we have really is our strength is our DBs. I think it's interesting. I think if we had a glass ball and we're sitting there looking at the teams that we're going to have to load up for, the Rams offensively are the guys we have to load up. Now you're sitting there throwing out, Riley Moss, PS2, obviously. They've been huge on Jaquan McMillan. We're not even talking about Jade Barron. I mean, holy cow, what a great opportunity to put some things out there and match up and do some things against the receivers. That could be the game that sets us apart. And if we can come in and, I personally go in thinking we can win every single game and be 17-0 at the end of the season. But to sit there and look at what we can load up against these guys from a defensive standpoint, there's no reason Bo can't keep us in every single game. And obviously showed it last year that no matter what, we're never out of a game. So I'm pretty excited at the prospects of that. And again, being on so much national TV, that's going to be huge for us this year.
Well, Jim, since you were mentioning the corners and that being one of the Broncos' great sort of advantages in terms of the depth and the overall talent, let's go ahead and segue into our topic for tonight, which is a breakdown of the DB room. Folks, that's why Jim gets paid the big bucks. He knew what he was doing there, transitioning us from from our a look at the schedule and whether or not the Broncos can be AFC West contenders and talking about our depth at corner. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. Now, Jim threw out some of the names, and yeah, we're gonna be facing some incredible offenses this year. And so, in such a pass-heavy league, you've got to be loaded up at the corner position, and thankfully, the Broncos are. And it just feels fitting anytime we talk about the Broncos DB room, really anytime we talk about the Broncos defense, that somewhere in the conversation we bring up Patrick Surtain. We'll go player by player and talk about them and how they did this past year and maybe even a little bit of what we expect coming into the new season. But gentlemen, what do you all think about Patrick Surtain's season this past year?
Little, had flashes of worry when it came to his ankle, but overall, I don't think you can complain with any of his play. I think once he had that ankle injury, he was attacked a little bit more. But other than that, like I don't it's PFF has him ranked number 2. Whoever is number 1, who they have number 1, it's a lie. He's number 1. Like I don't know if there's a whole lot to say about him just because it's just he's incredible. Just his man coverage, maybe his zone coverage is a little weaker, but he is a lockdown corner. Champ Bailey, Darrell Revis, that kind of a corner. So
yeah, I would agree with that. That's exactly what I was thinking about. Is the days of Revis Island. Watching a little bit of Champ Bailey. I mean, it's great to see the teams that every once in a while let's go ahead and challenge and let's see what's going on. I think that in thinking about Champ and thinking about guys back in the day like Louis Wright, Mike Harden, some of those guys, Louis was just he was that lockdown guy too for the Broncos. That was probably Steve Largent's worst nightmare back in the day, and Louis doesn't get enough. He doesn't get enough credit for it for sure. Yeah, PS2. He's a generational guy that you love having there at the corner position. You're going to get out game in, game out. Like you said, Braden, the ankle was a little bit worrisome. Hopefully him and Bo found a little magic in that this year between the ankle and the knee. And hopefully that's where I think he's like you said, how they're not finding him as the number 1 is pretty amazing.
Who is number 1? Well, while you go on to the next one, I'm gonna see what.
Yeah, I'm curious
what Faker is at number 1.
Yeah, I mean the bottom line. I wonder if it's the guy on the Patriots that had an incredible Super Bowl, even though they got destroyed. Was it Gonzalez? That would be if I had to hazard a guess. That's who I would throw out there. But whoever they have at number 1, good for them. But the bottom line is Patrick Surtain is elite. This defense, the way Vance Joseph has called it the past 2 years, does not work without Patrick Surtain essentially eliminating whatever side of the field he's on. And I mean, yes, the ankle injury. I've long felt that corner has to be one of the most difficult positions in all of sports. We can argue about which ones are harder, but like corner, I would never want to do it. The athletes that you are covering and how obvious your mistakes are when you make them, there's not a whole lot of hiding it. And so to have a guy as unique and as talented and truly elite as Patrick Surtain enables Vance Joseph to be far more aggressive than we'd be able to with a lesser corner. So, I mean, former NFL Defensive Player of the Year, he didn't look the exact same as he did 2 years ago, but he was elite. We need him. I expect him to be in that same realm, and he's worth everything that we're paying him. I'm thankful that we have him. Now, switching to the other corners, let's go ahead and go to the opposite side of the field to a guy who has, in my opinion, one of the hardest jobs in all of football in Riley Moss. having to sort of soak up all the targets since people are so deathly scared of Patrick Surtain on the other side. What did you all think of Riley this season?
You know, I think it's something where when you get picked on, when you have more targets, there's more room for error. There's just from a ratio standpoint. If someone's getting targeted times a game compared to or 10 times a game compared to one, you know, you're probably going to have a lot more mistakes show up on the player with getting targeted 10 times. That being said, maybe he does need to practice with some boxing gloves and try not to tug on a jersey every once in a while. Personally, I'd feel a little more comfortable. I know we'll talk about him a little later, but with Zadi Baron, I'd feel comfortable with if he could take on. He's a bigger cornerback. Um, I feel like if he was able to take that next step up and be that number 2 outside corner, I'd feel much better with Riley Moss taking that slot position. So, but I think he's great. I would love to keep him on past next year, but we don't know how next year's free agency is going to work out. So,
Sure. Yeah, one of the comments that was made about him early on was all the holding penalties he was getting, and I know he got pretty aggravated about the press that he was getting, and he's just telling people, I've always played an aggressive style, and until things change, I'm going to continue to play with an aggressive style. And yeah, again, I agree. It'd be nice if they taped his fingers together. Obviously, it doesn't really work well for a corner trying to catch the ball. But I think that he has to play with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because PS2 does get all that credit, and rightfully so. And I think Riley is just, again, he's playing a position, when they sit there and talk about it's the first white cornerback since the 70s or 80s to be out there. And so I think he gets a lot of notoriety for that and feels like he's got to set his own standard or his own stage. Yeah, he's just getting all that attention, and it's it'd be nice to see him up there. But I still maintain at one point in time, I see Riley, depending on what happens with McMillan, I could see Riley being a free safety and having a great career here in Denver for a very long time. Kind of like the Lions. So we go back to, trivia and working with 70s. Steve Foley was that guy that was a corner for a while, had to jump in there, and then they ended up finally moving him back to safety, and he still leads the Denver Broncos in interceptions today with 44. And I could see that Riley could be that guy if he'll allow somebody to talk him into making that change.
Yeah, I mean,
you mentioned,
you mentioned moving him to safety. I mean, recently another white boy lockdown corner, Cooper DeJean, getting moved to safety on the Eagles. So it's not.
Yep.
There's definitely precedence for it.
Yep. And I think you've already got the strong, so why not lock up the free and be good for the next 10 years or so at both of those positions? Would be fantastic.
That'd be really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I like that. I like that a lot. I started talking about Riley, saying that I think he has one of the hardest jobs in the NFL. I mean, being opposite of Patrick Surtain, people are going to avoid him for the most part. And, that leaves him in some really tough situations. I think he got a really unreasonable reputation. Yes, early in the season, he had some fairly blatant ones. But honestly, I don't mind that. I would rather him hold and be physical instead of giving up an uncontested catch. And I mean, even when he gets beat, he's still right there. And I've talked about this before on the pod, but you look at some of the biggest plays that happened against him. I think of the Keenan Allen touchdown in Los Angeles. I almost said San Diego. In Los Angeles, that ended up being the game winner. That was a one-handed catch by a veteran, future Hall of Famer in Keenan Allen, where Riley's hand was right there. And then you look at the Treylon Burks, I think it was a 2-point conversion in the corner that Treylon Burks goes up with one hand. Riley almost gets his fingertips to that ball. Even when he's beat, he's right there. Like,
Right.
what more could you ask for from a number 2 corner?
Sure.
I I think he's got an incredibly tough job. I think he does it really well. I would. This is just me throwing something out there. I would say as high as 30% of the defensive holding or pass interference calls that he got over the course of the year probably wouldn't have happened if it were a higher profile corner. Because I mean, they were looking for it. They were expecting him to do it at some point, and a lot of the times it was wide receiver initiated. So I don't know. I think Riley Moss gets a bad rap. I think he's done a great job. I don't see him back here next year. I think he's played well enough and is unique enough to where he's going to command a lot of money on the open market. And they've not. I'm not seeing anything about them approaching him on a contract extension, whereas they have approached the guy who we're about to talk about in Jaquan McMillan. What did you all make of him this past year?
A lot better than the year before.
For sure.
I see Jaquan McMillan still kind of in that he's going to make a play or a play is going to be made on him. There's not really a
That's a really good way of putting it.
yeah, I mean, incredible interceptions. If you need a pick, he's kind of your guy because he's a bit of a smaller, scrappy dude who is really underestimated. So we pick off Josh Allen. He picks him off in the AFC Championship game because it seems like he's just lagging behind a little bit, but he gets great position and makes a play on the ball. And that's been his MO. He makes great plays on when he has really good position on the ball. Maybe not necessarily on the player. But I also think that does bite him a little bit when he doesn't have because he tends to get beat quite a bit or on crucial third downs. Maybe it's the zone coverage that we might sometimes play or we're playing a really shifty Khalil Shakir who has burned us in the past. But I really like him in that nickel position, in that slot position, and that's something if my idea with Riley Moss was to move to to that slot position, then they'd have to battle it out. But anyways, I like him. I like what the idea of paying him and keeping him on the roster, especially when you're probably going to get a bit of a discount for him because he was undrafted and he's not your prototypical outside corner, and he's even a little smaller than your slot and nickel corner too. He's not a very big guy, so I think on that market you're getting a discount for him.
Yeah. I looking at McMillan, it comes to mind to sit there and think: is he a guy that where Chris Harris Jr. started as the nickel before he moved over to corner? Is he going to be that guy? Or are we sitting with another Bradley Roby who found his position? That was his nickel. That was his spot. And he ended up having to go to another team when he went and took off to the Texans before he got his spot. I don't know. If you can find a guy that says, hey, here's the nickel, here's your position, this is where we're keeping you, that's fantastic. But I think it's unrealistic. Because everybody wants to be that other guy, wants to be that lockdown guy. I don't know, Jake, one is there. I think that you're right, Braden, your assessment of, being in the right place at the right time on certain things, but still having those moments of, just having a brain fart, if you will, and not being in the right position, as opposed to where we talked about Bradley, and Bradley sitting out there in the right space, right time, close in proximity all the time, and Jaquan, still got a little bit of room that he's got to figure out before he gets there.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate everything both of you said, but what especially caught my attention is people have been in Denver media have been really high on McMillan for a while, but my assessment is the same as yours, Braden. this past year was a significant leap from his first year with the Broncos. And I mean, so much so that we didn't see Barron as much as I anticipated. When we drafted Barron, I was like, all right, McMillan's going to be the fourth corner. Like, we upgraded there. We're good. He played so well that, especially early on in the season, we sparsely saw Barron. And I mean, Barron got moved around a fair amount, and he looked pretty decent in different spots. But I think that's probably the biggest compliment I could pay to McMillan, the fact that he held off a first round draft pick in a position group of need going into last year, um, and made plays doing it. And now they placed a second round restricted free agency tender on him. He's going to make, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 5.8 million. And the early reports are that they're discussing a multi-year extension. And so, you know, I love anytime an undrafted player can make a roster and then make it to a multi-year extension. So good for him. I'd love to see him, take even another step forward. That's only going to be good for the Broncos. And I mean, if you know, if Riley does leave, then Jaquan and Jade and Patrick still being our corners going into things 2 years from now, I think we're in a decent position. Now, moving on to the safety positions. Or sorry, no, we haven't even talked about Jade Barron yet. What did you? I sort of threw my opinion out there. I didn't see him as much as I anticipated, but what did you all make of him when we did see him on the field?
He did pretty decent when he got his opportunities. I think he gave up some passes here and there, but he's coming into a crowded. He came into a crowded cornerback room, and I'm really hoping to see a lot of improvement. He should be competing for that CB2 or that slot nickel cornerback position. And if that doesn't happen, then I'd be pretty worried about having picked him in the first round. That being said, because he is a bigger bodied corner, I do wonder with Brandon Jones' injury from last year, if they don't take a look at him at that safety position to get him on the field and get him playing time, because he is an incredibly talented cornerback. He's an incredibly talented player. I mean, he got the award for best corner, best DB in college football his senior year. So I just can't imagine him not being on the field at some point this season consistently. And I'm kind of leaning on him being a part of that safety position, maybe if Brandon Jones isn't ready yet. But yeah, or maybe after the season, if Riley Moss leaves, then seeing him more. But yeah.
Yeah, to invest what you did, you've always got the time where, rookies are coming in, they're trying to get the speed of the game, figure out the game. It moves so much faster than you're used to. And, I don't care what program you go to, coming in and learning the speed of the NFL. Such a hard thing to do, to come out day one and be that guy. It happens very few. Obviously, PS2 had that, Champ Bailey, things like that. Barron, I think it's a nice problem to have. I think there are guys like Chris Abrams-Drain that are pushing him a little bit, making it a little bit tougher, taking some things away from him as well. And so I think that training camp this year, I think he's really going to have to set the world on fire. He's going to have to do some things that really make people step up and notice, or, it's maybe he's just sitting back there as an insurance policy for somebody going down, or like you said, Braden, maybe, Brandon Jones again, that free safety. It's a tough one. I think that's the the missing piece for us that we're going to figure out whether we choose to use a cornerback or go out and find another safety. I think it's going to be a tough one.
Well said. We'll see. We'll see what he looks like this year. Now, we mentioned the use of him at safety this past year and potentially seeing more of him there this year. Let's talk about the safeties. We have Brandon Jones and Tylone. I always mess up his first name, but Huafonga. Um, two great safeties. What did you all think of their performance this past year?
When healthy, probably the best safety duo in the league. Brandon Jones is a ball hawking safety. Really great. I'm a little biased, not just because of Broncos, but because fantasy football, did the individual players, and I had him on my team up until he was injured. But really, I think he was because of the Justin Simmons trade or the cutting Justin Simmons. And I don't think people were very high on him coming from the Dolphins. But I think he's fit into this defense really, really well. And so far, I can't complain about his play. He's been a highlight player on the Broncos at that safety position. As far as Talanoa Hufanga, he brings that Darian Stewart, kind of Kareem Jackson, kind of level of hitting. He's a linebacker 15 yards behind, back away from the line of scrimmage. And you need that. We have a history of having that on our Broncos defenses. So Steve Atwater, you need that hard hitting safety. And I think it pairs so well with Brandon Jones being able to be a bit of more of a coverage player. That being said, both players have a history with being injured, so it's something to definitely keep an eye out for. Hufanga was fully healthy last season, so hopefully that can continue.
Yeah, it was nice to see at least one of the two picks from the 49ers work out. Hufanga, I got to be honest with you again, thinking back to, like you said, the Atwater days, the Dennis Smith days. Guys feared coming over the middle, and I think Hufanga put a little bit of that back in there to get guys. Of course, he throws his body with a lot of reckless abandonment, and it just it's a good thing. Obviously, you don't want to see a guy like that get hurt, because I think that behind that, I think we set ourselves back. I haven't seen anybody in that position that makes me think that they're going to be afraid coming over the middle if we end up going that route. Brandon Jones, like you said, injured. Saw a lot of good things with the Dolphins. Got pretty excited about it, and then never really felt like I saw things materialize like I hoped they would. Because it seems like that would be a great 1A and 1B back there in the safety position. But I felt like Hufanga had to take on a lot more than maybe he should have had to. But he certainly, that guy, I wouldn't want to go across the middle on him. He'd definitely turn around and lay somebody out for sure. He didn't have a problem sticking his nose into the huddle, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think the safeties for any defense are key, but especially one as aggressive as Vance Joseph calls are truly important. Hufanga was used in lots of different ways this past year. We saw him in the box quite a bit, and you all threw out, Dennis Smith and Steve Atwater and guys like that. I thought a lot of John Lynch, the way that he was used in his later years with the Broncos. They'd bring him down, they'd send him on blitzes quite a bit. Hufanga got a lot of pressures on the quarterback for somebody playing in the safety position. And he's great against the run. He's just so much fun to watch play. He's not elite in coverage, but he battles. He fights for the ball. And I think his versatility especially in being able to blitz and come down against the run, brought a different element to this defense this past year that made them all the more dangerous. And to, to transition to Brandon Jones, again, I think Vance has to call the defense a lot different if Brandon Jones isn't as good as he is. I know we lost him during the Green Bay game, but before that, he was great as one of the best zone concept safeties in the whole NFL. And he's above average against, or sorry, in man-to-man coverage. So, I mean, as with any athlete, when healthy, you hope to get the best out of them, and their best is pretty good. And so, I would hope that we don't see any regression from the DBs. I think a lot of them are in places where they can step up. We're running out of time here, and we've got the depth players such as Chris Abrams, Drain, Damari Mathis, JL Skinner, Devin Key, and K'Jon Smith. Sorry for not being certain on the first name pronunciation, but do you all expect any of them to make big leaps from last year? And if you all had any bold predictions around what you expect to see out of this group, or who maybe comes in and contributes in a way that you hadn't expected, who would that be, if anybody?
I really like Chris Abrams' Drain. I think it was about 2 years ago. I forget who they were playing, but he made a really good play on the ball, picked off the quarterback. I think we ended up losing that game. It might have been the Chargers, for all I know. But I like bigger cornerbacks, especially when they're on the outside, as long as they can keep up with bigger wide receivers and not necessarily your Tyreek Hills and your Jalen Waddles. But if you can get that, body position and be a bigger cornerback, that's, what I like to see. And I don't know what it is about him. I just saw that pick and go, all right, I think he can play ball pretty well. I unfortunately don't see a whole lot of bold things happening with this cornerback group. I feel like we're very deep. I mean, we're talking about a first round pick, maybe not cracking the starting lineup. That's how deep we are. But what I would like to see is them really compete and put a lot of pressure on those starting players. Make them really think that, Jaquan McMillan, make him really, really think like, I had a great year this past year. I need to be 10 times better, 5 times, I need to be that much better to protect my job, because I know that there are people getting at my heels, who are under me. So.
I'd say, to look past the kind of the starters that we talked about tonight, I don't really see, when you look at a guy like JL Skinner, I thought really great things of him coming out of college. Devin Key is a guy I didn't really follow, but has done some good things. But that's the bulk of our special teams guys, and the guys that are going to go down and get it done on kickoff return, things like that, punt return. And so I think we're pretty well set on that. Those guys are all role players, other than, the 5 guys we really heavily talked about tonight. Or 6, excuse me. I think those are our guys. I think those are ride and dies for the season. I feel pretty strong about where we're sitting at and where we go. And of course, again, how are we going to do against the Rams? That's going to be a big one this year. I think if we come out of that one looking pretty good, I think we're looking good for February. Don't want to throw it out there too much, but I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah. So I agree. I think it would be tough to call out any sort of bold predictions for a group that's as established as this, but we do have 3 significant players in contract years. We've got Riley Moss, Jaquan McMillan, although negotiations apparently have started between his camp and the Broncos, but also, Jones is also in a contract year. So whenever that's the case, the NFL is as cutthroat of a league as exists in the world. So if, Riley Moss tweaks something, if Brandon Jones does not look back to his full self and they think that they have somebody who could do the job, say 70 to 80% as good, or are they going to sort of get phased out? I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility in a contract year. I don't see Riley Moss coming back next year with as much money as he would probably need, because he's still on his rookie contract. I don't know that Brandon Jones would be getting a significant amount of money for the Broncos. He plays in a good system for his style of play. Maybe he gives us a discount, but I wonder if those two in particular face pressure internally to have their roles taken over by people in the following year. That's not exactly a bold prediction, but I am curious about that. Yeah, so we'll see. Well, there you have it. That's the Broncos DB room for the 2025 season. We talked about some things that we might see coming up this year, and boy, this group's going to be tested. This group will be tested early and often throughout the season, and I think, I think everybody expects the Broncos at a minimum to make the playoffs, but anything beyond that, that they accomplish, whether it's an AFC West repeat championship or a deep run in the playoffs, I think will have a lot to do with the success of this group. So here's hoping everybody stays healthy and competes at a high level, and we look forward to seeing how they get to it. That's it for tonight, everybody. Thanks for joining us here at Broncos Zone, part of the EPS family. We look forward to seeing you all next week. Have a good night.
See you.
See ya.